Welcome to Every Church a Peace Church, a program that promotes the belief that the church can turn the world towards peace if the church lived and taught as Jesus lived and taught. Welcome back. My name is Don Edwards. I'm the host for this program. And this program seeks to talk about the issues of peace and faith, and also violence and nonviolence. Many of our guests and many of the programs that I've had the privilege to host and produce have centered around the Middle East. And that's because, in my opinion, so much of the violence around the world finds its root cause in the struggle of justice by the Palestinian people and the occupation, against the occupation that's being conducted by Israel, and the counteraction of violence in response to that, the cycle of violence that exists in Israel and Palestine. There's so much a focus of the violence that we see throughout the world. So that's why many of our programs are devoted to informing you about the issues, what it's like there, some of the issues that can lead towards peace and towards justice in that region. And today's guest is a very informative guest, Dr. Sis Levin. Dr. Sis Levin is a PhD from Columbia in peace education. She has spent the past 20 years in the Middle East. She's an Episcopal missionary. She is involved in teaching children and teaching young adults the nonviolent path that will lead to lead to justice and lead to peace. Sis has been a guest before, and I want to welcome you back, Sis. Sis is with us on a little 2-month break from her missionary responsibilities in Bethlehem, which is Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And I want to make another connection here with you, Sis. Sis is married to another activist, Jerry Levin, her husband. Jerry, many of you might know, was during the mid-'80s the bureau chief for CNN, stationed in Beirut, Lebanon, and was kidnapped by Hezbollah and was hostage for just about 12 months, was released through the efforts primarily of his wife, Sis. That story is a remarkable story. It's a story.
Excuse me, and a nonviolent team who wanted to prove that the nonviolent answer works better than the other answer, which was trading arms to the Ayatollah and taking the money to the Contras,
right,
which became a scandal.
Yes.
So the comparison is still useful in looking at conflict resolution, what really works, long run.
Right, and that story is capsulized in Sis's book called Beirut Diaries, and this book was also made into a movie.
TV movie?
TV movie starring Marlo Thomas called Held Hostage. And I saw that movie. It still runs. It's a really interesting, exciting movie, and it was good to...
It was well done, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's still very related to the issues because they're still hostages and they're still in dire jeopardy, and those solutions are still... Which is a better way to go at this?
Yes,
so
yes.
It's still relevant.
Right. It's the unfortunate story of hostage taking and violence to retrieve hostages is a ongoing saga that keeps digging us deeper and deeper into trouble.
Apparently.
And your example of working nonviolently to free your husband with a group.
Well, it was quite a lesson.
Yes.
I don't recommend it, but it was a real on-the-ground lesson.
Yes, well,
and how it works.
The movie portrayed the struggle that you underwent and the difficulties in retrieving your husband from that desperate situation. Let's talk a little about what your mission is now, Sis. Doctor, if I might call you Sis.
Please do. Everyone does. The children call me Dr. Seuss, and I met him once, and his materials are a great help in all this because he really was a visionary about peace, about what peace really is. Probably the most misunderstood subject in the world. Were it understood better, it would take the place of war, I think.
Yeah.
That's why we want to learn about it.
Now, your work is primarily centered in Bethlehem and the West Bank. Is that right?
Right now, it is. Right now, for this reason, we needed a model for all of Israel and Palestine to look at. What does it look like? Because many of us in this field and in the world know that you can know all there is to know about a subject and not know how to teach it. And so if you can't teach it, you can't learn it. And it is called peace education. What is education for peace? The most important thing about educating for peace is that you understand systems, how whole systems work. Because anything less, no matter how well-meaning and often very expensive mission, is a Band-Aid. It won't hold up. It won't hold it together. So in education, you have to work from kindergarten systemically through university, where you're working on a whole system constantly and comprehensively. What are the pieces that fit in instead of just one, like conflict resolution is the buzzword of the days. You don't start nonviolent conflict resolution with kindergartners. They don't know what you're talking about. You start on the level of the basic pieces of socio education for how do we get along together in this world, and what do we do when we have conflict. The fact of the business is conflict is a part of life, a very important part of life. It's what you do with conflict that turns it either way. Did you know, for instance, the Chinese translation of conflict is opportunity?
No, I didn't.
Instead of running from it, as my grandmother taught me, run away, live to fight another day. Instead of the old flight or fight syndrome, there's the third way, which Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and others discovered on the ground. The third way is the way of nonviolence. And more and more and more, if we've looked at history at all, we've seen that is the only way out of the trap, as you said, because violence is a cycle.
Yes.
A complete cycle and a complete trap. So how do you get out of that trap, and does it work? You have to learn how, and you have to practice.
How do you teach nonviolence, say at the kindergarten level, to Palestinian children who are surrounded by violence, who can't sleep because of the sounds of bombs, the sounds of gunfire, who are hunger because they're not able to get the foods and the nourishment because of the occupation? Those are forces that seem so oppressive to us, even as adults, and to have children experience that on a fairly daily basis. Now, how can, ordinarily that would yield anger and revenge. How do you capture or turn the anger, turn the revenge into nonviolence and an appreciation even for the struggle, the third way?
I'm really glad you put it to me that way, and I think, to quote Jerry, if we can't get it right in this place, we can't get it right anywhere. This is the most challenging place. We see lots of challenges elsewhere, historically and right now. Again, violence has become the #1 health problem among children in the world. And we have these problems in America, as you know. Columbine, the children went to see Bowling for Columbine with me in Bethlehem and turned to me and said, "And we're the terrorists?" You know, they saw the American story. This is happening to children everywhere. I don't know why it is. Maybe you can help me. But sometimes the worse a situation is, the easier it is to understand the only way out. And certainly in this case, where generations, this is the longest military occupation of a people or a culture in the history of the world. It is unimaginable what they are suffering. And they're seeing clearly that every time they tried violence, it was a trap. It didn't help. It didn't work. This is the way out. It is much easier to teach a kindergartner this than it is someone who's carried more and more and more baggage, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And this is true in all of education. So when we start with the basics about how we're going to get along at home, and you don't go to home first, you start in school, because if you start in school, the homes come to you. The parents are all coming to me now and saying, "My child's life has changed. We have hope again." They have a vision for what can be, and they know what doesn't work. So then we do parenting classes too. But the children basically, in understanding, sharing and supporting each other and being positive, losing the negatives, which are just self-destructive, making a plan for building, they prefer the word building, building peace, learning how to do that, how to do community service, even at 4 years old, to give back. That reaches into the broader classroom, which is the whole community. So that work is honored, and it's contagious, and it's catching. But you have to master it. You have to give up the negative side. You have to give up revenge. But you're glad to do that when you see how deadly it is. Now, you have to believe this. Practice it, learn it, step by step. And then you introduce prejudice elimination. It just has no place in the modern world. We've dealt with that. We know better. The celebration of diversity. It's wonderful that we're all different. We have so much to tell each other. This business of demonizing another culture because we've decided they are the enemy is self-destructive, and also becomes very clear. It's a maneuver by a power structure to get you to see other people as less than human, so it's okay to kill them. Yes. Because look, they're all terrorists, you know, or vice versa. I'm not really taking sides in this, because the heartbreak of what's happening to Israel, and I want to assure you, all of my colleagues in Israel, and many, many Israeli people are, for instance, as heartbroken by Israel's performance as those of us who went to Baghdad were about America's military entrance into that problem. It doesn't work, it didn't work, and if you're in it, you can see it. If you're only watching it on television or talking at a cocktail party about it, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, so you choose sides and demonize the other.
Well, it's always been a principle, a biblical principle, and perhaps a psychological and a physical principle, that you reap what you sow. And when you're reaping violence, the mental violence, the physical violence, that comes around. It goes around and comes around.
Don, you know this, and I have learned this. You know this from the heart. I hate to tell you, a majority of people that we're hearing from don't know this. When Jerry was in Beirut, I was in seminary, and I studied Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, in Aramaic, in his own words. There's no wiggle room there. He clearly spelled it out for Christians. And I went on and studied the subject of forgiveness in Islam and in Judaism. at the heart of all three of the families of Abraham, clearly the message is you cannot kill. You must not kill. It doesn't work, it's stupid, it's wrong, it hurts you. But we somehow get caught up in the military or consumerist attitude, and we think, I'm a person of faith, but we're not getting it.
No.
Well, Jesus' disciples didn't always get it. And then we get to that crucial difference for Christians where he said, you have to love your enemy. And everybody says, now you're meddling.
Yeah.
But he said it. He said it clearly.
He said it, and he meant it with every fiber.
And he lived it.
And he lived it.
And he proved how it worked.
Yes.
The most important message the world has ever had.
We continue to talk about, and for some of us we continue to experience, but for most of the church, it's a slogan. The idea of loving your enemy is an idea, or an idea sometime in the future. I'll get to that point, but right now I have to fight the terrorists. I have to demonize, and I have to use our military.
And it's justified. We had to do this.
Yeah.
You know, when you say that, it makes me think, because my concentration is totally on the children. I'm interested in the other discussion, heartbroken. But when I look at this argument between religions, real estate, Israel, and practicality, governments, what they don't realize is they're losing their children. They're all losing their children.
Yes.
Because I'm with them. I know what's happening to Israeli children. I know what's happening to Palestinian children. So beneath this line, the real victims are these children. And we seem to have forgotten that.
Yeah.
For Christians, Jesus said, the little child will lead you. The little child will lead you. And if you could be in the classrooms with me and the few who are allowed on the Israeli side to teach this way. And I say the few because what's happened to the educational system in Israel is all the money has gone to military. And it's justified in their minds. They're losing their children. I have many friends in the labs, the psychology labs, who are looking at the children and what's happening to them. Also trying to work with the soldiers. The backlash from the military would break your heart. It simply isn't working.
Yeah. No, the oppression demeans the oppressor as well as the oppressed.
They're both caught in it.
They're both caught in a violent degradation of the soul when there's violence and revenge.
I've had Israeli mothers say to me, it wouldn't matter if we gained the whole thing, we're losing our soul.
Yes.
And we're certainly losing our children, if you don't know what your soul is, but we are losing our children. They're both the tragedy and the hope, because they do learn it, they do understand it, they do speak with a wisdom. They're teaching us at the same time creative avenues that we wouldn't have thought of. So they're our best hope, and the story needs to be told to a world who only sees that place in darkness and agony. They need to see that one really great light, because true to the promise, it is working.
We're going to be showing some photographs as we speak, and perhaps you can tell us just what those photographs represent. There's a picture of you with some kindergartners. Tell us again, do you focus on one school, the system, or just what is your work?
It's a model for educators. The educators said, set it up systemically and comprehensively so we can see it. So this model is in 5 requesting kindergartens in Bethlehem. And again, as you said, the trouble is so pronounced. It's amazing because we're walled in, as you know.
Yes. As I know, most people do not know that the birthplace of Christ is now surrounded by
very
wall
high and very thick concrete wall.
with guard towers.
And soldiers all around. And some of the children, again, on both sides are saying, maybe the wall will be opaque. Maybe people will look through the walls. I also have teenagers who say, let them build the wall. We will build bridges. This isn't forever. The Berlin Wall came down. In the kindergarten picture, these are 4-year-olds. We are beginning with the working out of problems using Quaker material that is used itself as one of the pieces in many schools. And that little exercise is the donkey story that many people in peace work understand, where the 2 donkeys are tied together, and on one side of the field is a stack of hay, and on the other side is another stack of hay, and they're tied together, and they're pulling, and they're pulling, and they're pulling. And then finally they figure out if they go together, they can have breakfast over here and go together and have lunch over here. The point being, we work together through problems, not against each other, but together. And then we think creatively and we find solutions. It looks very simplistic, but I saw a poster in the bookstore, in the Quaker bookstore, I must admit, in Oxford, when we were lecturing in the UK, a huge one, and it had named the donkeys the conflicting countries or nations of the world, pulling against each other, competing, which kills all creativity and all creative nonviolent solutions. You can't think when you're fighting like that.
And do you extend it beyond the elementary level?
We do, but we start with basic principles, supporting each other, giving up negatives, noticing hurts, noticing them, seeking the wise people to help us solve those hurts, and then finally to giving back where the real happiness is. We have many, many in this country and abroad, many, many depressed children, clinically depressed. Ask your doctors. And we haven't yet figured it out. Even from the most affluent situations, the psychologist's offices are full of depressed children. The best answer, and the smartest psychologists tell the child, help somebody else, try it, help somebody else, get yourself off your hands. So we do this with 4-year-olds and watch it happen. And then they all resoundingly say, good for you. And the room becomes a pleasant, good for you place. When I'm walking the streets of Bethlehem or go in a store, parents will come up to me and say, good for you, Dr. Levin, because it's contagious. The positive, creative approach is contagious, but it's based on principles that we could learn in Sunday school or in temple or in the mosque. The basic workable principles of faith. Teach these things, but you think you have them. You don't really. Certainly you don't when you choose going to war to solve the donkey problem. Then you haven't mastered it. Then we go to first grade, second grade, third grade, all the way to university. It's very interesting that in the middle field there, and this was news to me, they taught me, in the middle field there, the teenagers get it very well. Maybe because of their suffering, I don't know, but they are very, very mature. They haven't really had a childhood. So they say to me, teenage is middle-aged. And I say, that doesn't translate when I go home. No, they say, Dr. Levin, it's middle-aged because we still understand the little ones. We know how they think. We know how they're learning. We mentor them. We're pulling them along. But we also understand the older ones and the vision. If this isn't their vision, they're off track. So they're very helpful. They have older brothers and sisters and community members. But they're wonderful with the little ones, because the little ones, of course, admire them. In America, when I've worked with teenagers, especially during the Rodney King riots, where I did my field work, we say teenagers get caught up in it because their hormones are raging and they go to drugs. And, you know, the teenager is still to be able to teach and learn from a teenager is a piece of education we haven't really mastered in this country. So it's interesting. I'm learning more than I'm giving, but we have a system, and this system will change systemically. Because scientifically, that's the only way it can.
Well, you've been devoted to peace education in amongst the Palestinian and Israeli population now for how many years?
Well, 20 years, because a Christian woman fell in love with and married a Jewish man, the grandson of a rabbi, and found herself in a mostly Muslim country in the middle of a civil war. But increasingly, the dots were connected for me, especially in the Near East School of Theology, one of the famous ones in the world in Beirut, because I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and I saw what we put Martin Luther King in jail, and the church at that time, my church, thought it was all right. I know that he taught the children, the African-American children in Birmingham, how to do nonviolence. And that one thing broke the back of segregation when nothing else could. Not economics, not politics. Below the line, when the children understand. You see, the one thing people can all agree on, no matter who they are, is they care about the well-being of their children.
You're looking forward to an event coming up involving children. Why don't you give us a little preview of what's in store involving the children?
This may be the greatest challenge of my life, because I am not courageous. The only courageous thing I ever did was speak out against the American government when the hostages were held in Lebanon. Speak the truth.
Yeah, we've got 1 minute, so let's see what we...
The children of Bethlehem want to ride the donkeys like Jesus did, and they're mostly Muslim children, some Christian, and their Israeli counterparts want to ride donkeys from Bethlehem to Jerusalem like Jesus did on Palm Sunday of next year.
Through the walls, through the
guards, through the walls, through the town. It's only a few miles, so we can do it, and I will do it. And there are many families who are willing to do it. It's very frightening.
Well, I disagree with you regarding your heroism. I think you are a heroine. To do what you do, where you do it, requires great courage, great faith, and great commitment towards peace. And
Don, we have to do it there.
Yes.
We have to do it there.
Well,
the world is watching.
I want to thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you
Sis,
so much.
Dr. Sis.
God bless.
Thank you for being with us on Every Church of Peace Church. Seek peace, and you'll find peace, and you will be peace. Thank you.
Our back on